Good morning, you're watching AnewZ. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the headlines. Canada follows the UK plan to recognise a Palestinian state. Donald Trump announces a trade deal with South Korea and 50% tariffs on Brazil. A Syrian-Israeli ministerial meeting is set to take place in Baku today. Canada will recognise the state of Palestine following similar moves by the UK and France. The decision hinges on Palestinian reforms and has drawn criticism from Israel, which calls it a reward to Hamas.
Canada will recognise a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly this September, joining the UK and France in a coordinated diplomatic shift. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says the move hinges on Palestinian Authority reforms, including elections that exclude Hamas.
For these reasons, Canada intends to recognise the State of Palestine during the session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This intention is based on the willingness of the Palestinian Authority to undertake essential reforms, including the promise by its president, Mahmoud Abbas, to hold general elections in 2026 and not to militarize the Palestinian state.
This comes after UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer confirmed plans to recognise Palestine unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire and a lasting peace agreement.
So today, as part of this process towards peace, I can confirm the UK will recognise the State of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution.
This move comes after French President Macron became the first G7 leader last week to publicly endorse recognising Palestine on the platform X. Israel has condemned the recognition plans, calling them a reward to Hamas. Critics argue that recognition now risks undermining efforts to reach a ceasefire and could further inflame tensions in the region. However, supporters say it reflects frustration with stalled peace talks and the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the West Bank. If the UK and France proceed, the US would be the only permanent UN Security Council member not recognising a Palestinian state. The diplomatic shift signals a growing frustration within Western capitals over the long-running Israeli-Palestinian conflict and raises questions about how this will affect future peace negotiations.
The United Nations is preparing to send urgent aid to Syria's southern province of Sueda after days of intense fighting left hundreds dead and forced around 175,000 people from their homes. UN agencies received permission from Damascus to deliver the aid directly. The convoy, organised by the World Food Programme, will carry food and essential supplies to civilians in need. The upcoming UN convoy will carry food and essential supplies, according to the World Food Programme's Syria chief, Marianne Ward.
So essentially, we've pumped in almost 250 metric tons of wheat flour for the bakeries in Sueda. But really, that's 4 or 5 days worth of supply. It's not enough. So we're continuing to try and get more wheat flour into Sueda. Then RTEs, we've sent enough for 50,000 people. But again, the entire population needs support. And we have estimates that there were 500,000 people living in the governorate before. So we're estimating that literally 500,000 people would need support. Some have left, of course, but nonetheless, anybody who is impacted by the violence in Sueda requires support.
The US has announced its most significant Iran-related sanctions since 2018. It targets more than 115 individuals, entities and vessels tied to Tehran's global oil shipping network. Tehran condemns the move as a direct attack on its economy.
The US Treasury Department on Wednesday unveiled a major wave of sanctions targeting over 115 Iran-linked individuals, entities and vessels in what officials call the most significant Iran-related sanctions action since 2018. The move intensifies the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign, following last month's bombing of key Iranian nuclear sites. At the center of the sanctions is Mohammad Hossein Shamkhani, son of senior Supreme Leader Advisor Ali Shamkhani. According to Treasury, Shamkhani operates a vast global shipping network through intermediaries that facilitate the sale of Iranian and Russian oil, generating tens of billions of dollars in illicit revenue to support Tehran. The sanctions affect 15 shipping companies, 52 vessels, 12 individuals, and 53 entities across 17 countries, including Panama and Italy. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson condemned the sanctions as a hostile US act, calling them an evil attempt to undermine Iran's economy and public welfare. The EU had also sanctioned Shamkhani earlier this month over ties to the Russian oil trade. While the US insists the move is Iran-focused, officials acknowledged the action will impact Russia as well. The announcement comes amid dim prospects for renewed US-Iran diplomacy following recent military escalations.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has dismissed the nuclear dispute as a Western excuse to undermine Iran's progress. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says there are no plans to resume talks with the US as tensions escalate ahead of a possible return to United Nations sanctions.
Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei stated that nuclear enrichment is just an excuse and that the US opposes the Iranian nation's achievements in knowledge. He said all their talk about nuclear issue, uranium enrichment, human rights, and such things are nothing but excuses. Furthermore, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi rejected reports on plans for renewed talks with the US about Iran's nuclear program. He told the state IRIB TV that no specific plan has been drawn up for the resumption of the talks. Iranian and US negotiators were scheduled to hold their sixth round of nuclear negotiations mediated by Oman in June, but they were disrupted by US joining Israel in attacking Iran's nuclear sites. Iran has laid the precondition for resumption of talks that it would not be attacked again during the negotiations. Last Friday, delegates from Iran, France, Germany, the UK, plus EU met in Istanbul to discuss Tehran's nuclear program after the European Troika warned it would apply for fast return of UN nuclear sanctions in October if a deal is not reached by end of August. Prior to the talks in Turkey, Araghchi said Iran will continue its policy of uranium enrichment and that it will stress it at the Istanbul discussions too. Turachir Alilu, reporting for AnewZ TV, Tehran.
South Korea has reached a last-minute trade deal with the US, locking in a 15% tariff rate on its exports. The agreement includes major Korean investments in US industries.
South Korea has sealed a last-minute trade deal with the US, avoiding steep new tariffs that were set to hit its exports from August 1st. The agreement sets a 15% tariff rate on South Korean imports, lower than the threatened 25%, and includes a $350 billion Korean investment in the US economy.
The most remarkable point in this agreement is the expansion of cooperation with the United States in the shipbuilding sector. The South Korea and US Shipbuilding Fund of $150 billion will encompass the entire shipbuilding ecosystem, including ship construction, MRO, and equipment. It will be invested in specific projects based on the needs of our country's companies.
Seoul will also buy $100 billion worth of US energy and open more broadly to American goods, but it held firm on beef and rice. Washington had pushed to ease import limits and lift age restrictions on US beef, but South Korea refused, citing food security and domestic backlash. Farmers had threatened mass protests if protections were weakened. While the deal avoided that flashpoint, not all sectors were spared. Steel and aluminium exports from South Korea will still be hit with a 50% tariff under Trump's global tariff rules. Market reaction was mixed. The Kospi rose nearly 1% as investors welcomed a deal that avoided worse penalties, but major automakers took a hit. Hyundai and Kia shares dropped 2% and 3.3% respectively. Meanwhile, Trump also announced fresh trade deals with Cambodia and Thailand, part of a broader tariff push ahead of his August 1st deadline.
The economic fallout is escalating between Brazil and the United States. President Donald Trump has slapped steep tariffs on Brazilian imports, triggering a strong response from Brasilia. With oil exports temporarily suspended and emergency measures underway, the trade dispute is quickly becoming a geopolitical flashpoint.
US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order increasing tariffs on most Brazilian imports to 50%, up from the previous 10%. The White House says the move is in response to Brazil's alleged suppression of free speech and judicial actions against former President Jair Bolsonaro. In response, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has pledged to invoke Brazil's economic reciprocity law, asserting that if the US charges Brazil 50%, Brazil will charge US 50%. The President also called an emergency cabinet meeting to design a coordinated response strategy, even as diplomatic channels remain open. However, the tax hikes exclude oil. The US is Brazil's top export. It's after Petrobras, Shell, Total Energies, ExxonMobil, and Equinor all suspended shipments to America for most of July ahead of the 1st of August deadline. However, deadline has since moved to the 6th of August. Shipments have now resumed. Still, the disruption underscored how ambiguity in trade policy can ripple across supply chains.
Uma metralhadora tarifária giratória.
Trump launches a rotating tariff machine gun indiscriminately, and without good reasoning. This creates great insecurity for all companies and sectors that have commercial relations with the United States, so they are forced to seek new markets to diversify. So this instability imposed by the Trump administration on international trade creates this insecurity and will inevitably force countries to diversify their trading partners. Naturally, the US is a formidable market, and no one wants to lose its market share, but this market needs to be relatively friendly.
Meanwhile, Brazil's government has voiced concern over the impact on vital export sectors, including coffee, beef, orange juice, and aircraft. Officials noted that Brazil supplies a third of all coffee consumed in the US. Speaking to CNN Brazil, Finance Minister Fernando Haddad said he aims to preserve business confidence despite the uncertainty. However, he added that the full extent of the US measures remains unclear. Haddad also noted an unexpected side effects, such as falling prices in Brazil's domestic food market.
I'm even noticing this. The reports I'm getting on price behavior over the last 2 weeks are precisely those that are being targeted by the tariffs, especially meat and fruit. There has been a perception that retail prices are now falling. We cannot be arrogant or submissive. We have to respect Brazil. Brazil has a good size. Every country deserves respect. But Brazil, because of its dimension, its importance in the world, and its historic multilateral diplomacy, I think we have all the conditions to prevent August 1st from being a fateful day. We will continue negotiating.
Alongside the tariff hike, Washington has also imposed visa restrictions and asset freezes on Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes and several associates.
President Donald Trump announced on his Truth Social platform that the United States has concluded a trade deal with Pakistan. The agreement is set to jointly develop the country's oil reserves. Trump said that the selection process for the lead oil company is underway. Pakistani Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar confirmed the agreement, though no further details have been disclosed, and the Pakistani embassy in Washington has yet to comment. A Syrian-Israeli ministerial meeting will be held on Thursday in Baku, a diplomat told AFP. The main focus will be on the security situation in southern Syria. Syrian Foreign Minister Assad al-Shaibani and Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer are expected to attend. The talks follow deadly clashes in Sueda and come days after their previous meeting in Paris. Shaibani will also stop in Moscow earlier the same day for separate talks. In a statement from prison, opposition leader Mamuka Kazaradze has accused the Georgian government of sabotaging the Anaklia Deep Sea port project. As new talks with a Chinese company move forward, the port's future now raises fresh questions about Georgia's geopolitical alignment.
From behind bars, the opposition leader Mamuka Kazaradze has accused the ruling Georgian Dream Party of what he called sabotaging the Anaklia Deep Sea port project. In his statement, Kazaradze claimed that the government deliberately obstructed a development vital for Georgia's national interests. He argued that the Anaklia port could already be operational today, bringing thousands of jobs and turning Georgia into a regional transit hub if it had received Western backing from the very beginning. But for now, the current government is pursuing another options. Ties have reportedly been developing with Chinese communication construction company, or otherwise CCCC. If the deal goes through, the Georgian government will own 51% of this project, while the CCCC will hold the remaining 49% and serve as the main contractor. The supporters of this potential deal argue that Chinese firms bring financing, speed and experience, the factors that could finally launch construction after the years of delay. But critics warn that partnering with U.S. blacklisted company could strain Georgia's future relationship with Washington and pull the country farther from its declared Euro-Atlantic path. The Anaklia Deep Sea Port was originally envisioned as a Western-oriented project with a high-capacity gateway between Europe and Asia, giving access to deep waters for large cargo ships. For now, with government's efforts and plans to select the investor still underway, the project's future hinges not only on contracts or logistics, but also on geopolitical direction Georgia chooses to take. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, AnewZ.
Georgia has connected 5 solar power plants with a total capacity of 10 megawatts to its national grid, marking the first time solar energy has entered the country's transmission system. Supported by nearly $5 million in local bank funding, Georgia's Economy Ministry says this project is part of a broader renewable energy effort. Currently, 125 megawatts of wind power are under construction, with an additional 200 megawatts in development. The long-term goal is to strengthen energy security and enable electricity exports to Europe via a planned Black Sea cable. Washington is stepping up its focus on Central Asia. The US is offering Kazakhstan new export routes and raising concerns about the expanding influence of Russia and China. Our correspondent in Almaty has more details.
Kazakhstan is once again in the geopolitical spotlight, and this time American interests are front and center. Julie Stafford, who is nominated to be the U.S. ambassador to Kazakhstan, told the Senate during her confirmation hearings that nearly half of all critical minerals that the U.S. economy and national security depend on are found in Kazakhstan. She made these remarks while discussing America's strategy to diversify sources of strategic raw materials, especially those needed for high-tech industries, defense, and the move toward a green economy. At the hearings, Stafford also highlighted a key priority: countering Russian and Chinese influence in Kazakhstan. She explained that Russia applies pressure through its long land border, while China is actively expanding its role in Kazakhstan's telecommunications and resource sectors. Given this, Stafford believes it's in America's interest to see Kazakhstan stable, independent, and prosperous. She also said that Washington is ready to work with Astana on developing alternative export routes that bypass Russia. This could include reducing reliance on the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, which carries up to 80% of Kazakhstan's oil. By early 2025, Kazakhstan has identified 38 promising sites with rare earth metal reserves totaling around 2.6 million tons. One of the most notable discoveries is the Jana Kazakhstan site in the Karaganda region, where initial estimates put the reserves at about 20 million tons. Experts say this deposit could become the third largest in the world after China and Brazil if these numbers are confirmed. And today, Kazakhstan is carefully navigating its relationships with major global powers. On one hand, there is China, which has made significant investments and gained broad access to the country's resources. On the other hand, Russia remains a close partner with strong historical and economic connections. Meanwhile, Astana is also actively working to deepen its ties with Europe, Turkey and the United States. And essentially, Kazakhstan aims to maintain positive relations with all these partners. While this approach opens up new opportunities, it also carries certain risks. And so the United States sees Julie Stafford as a key figure to advance its interests and expand its presence in a region that's playing an increasingly important role on the global stage. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzina, AnewZ.
And that's all we have from Baku for now. Stay tuned to AnewZ for more updates.